decision, and they have appealed that decision, but I was not able to find the state of that law. So the laws are in a state of flux, but as you all know, you can change laws and it takes a long, long time for cultures to catch up. So it was hard for me to watch the broadcast from the last Lambeth because it continued the pattern of talking about how painful it is for the church to come to terms with this, how painful that it has been for the church to wrestle with this, that the bishops have suffered through this. And I just wanted to go, screw the bishops. What about the human beings whose lives have been, pardon my language, but for these bishops to talk about what they're suffering at great length, I just had a hard time listening to it. What about the human beings who are involved? People made in the image of God. And I listened to the Church of England. You know, they've now done this great progressive thing where they are going to offer blessings of same-sex civil unions. And yet most of the coverage was related to how painful that was for the people who were opposed to it. I'm just tired of hearing about their pain. I'm just tired of it. So ask me questions. I can go on at great length. I have a soapbox over here that I'm going to get off of. So
Katie, you're terrific. I'm going to ask you the first question, then open it. If you would use your reactions thing to the raise hand thing, that would be easiest for me because then I see you on my screen. What would you recommend, Katie? What we're about is trying to decide what kind of action to take in the diocese pass to General Convention in terms of a response to the Anglican Communion about both the 110 at Lambeth, but the ongoing plight of LGBTQ plus people in Africa. What advice would you have for us in terms of the stance to take?
That's a good question. I have moments of great hope for the Anglican Communion, and then I have moments when I'm just ready to totally walk away from it. I think we have got to continue to pressure the bishops of the Episcopal Church, which is an autonomous province of the Anglican Communion. The Archbishop of Canterbury has no power in any province except that of the Church of England. It is important for us to remember that the only power any of these bishops have in other provinces other than their own is that of the bully pulpit. And I'm amazed again and again at the obliviousness of him. At the end of the 2008 Lambeth Conference, Rowan Williams held a press conference in which he was saying that, you know, they were just going to, LGBT people were just going to have to wait until the church was ready for them. They were going to have to sacrifice themselves for the good of the larger communion. And so I asked him a question and I said, you know, I have a friend that has said that if I put myself up on the cross, that's sacrifice. But if you put me on the cross, that's murder. How do you respond to that, Archbishop? And he could not answer the question. I mean, there was this long silence, and then he goes into this long answer as only Rowan Williams could, just a word salad of, you know, that it was just important that we all sacrifice for the good of, but it wasn't all of us that he was asking to sacrifice. It was only gay, lesbian and gay LGBT Anglicans who were being asked to sacrifice to make other people comfortable. And there were some very brave American bishops, Episcopalian bishops who spoke up, but not enough. And I think we have to have the courage, we have to urge our bishops to have the courage to speak out and use their bully pulpits on behalf of the most vulnerable people on the planet. In many cases, use their power to do that and blatantly use our money if we have to. I mean, who do you think supports most of the cost of the Lambeth conferences?
And one of
Us.
our resolution does have some monetary things attached to it. Thank you, Katie. That's amazing. I just wanted to share that Jim Naughton, who's the head of Canonical Communications, has made a similar point. He's about talking across differences and waiting and the pain. He said, there is, however, a more profound division in the community. It is between those who are at risk of having the crap eaten out of them for loving whom they love and those who are not. And until the Anglican Communion talks across that difference, it is complicit in the persecution of faithful queer Christians, and worse than that, it is complicit by design. So he's kind of saying what you're saying. Greta has had her hand up, and then Lee Crawford.
Thanks, Stan, and thank you, Katie, for being here with us tonight. I typed my question into chat, but I just want to expand it slightly. And my question was, did any of the bishops, basically who has seen this video? Did the bishops in places like Nigeria and Uganda see this video? And I'd like to expand that by asking, has the House of Bishops in the Episcopal Church seen this video? And if the answer is no to those things, why not? And if it's yes, what has been their reaction?
In 2008, we showed it at the Lambeth Conference and invited every bishop there to come see it. And many, many did. We then followed up by mailing discs of this. Remember, this was in 2008. So we were mailing discs to every bishop of the Anglican Communion, which meant doing formats for different countries, different formats. But every one of them received it. So they had 2 opportunities to see it in Canterbury while they were at Lambeth, and then again when they got home. We then showed it at General Convention that the next year at General Convention. It was shown, I think, twice. I may be wrong about that, but it was an open showing. Any bishop was invited to come. And of course, all the bishops of the Episcopal Church were sent a DVD of it. So the bishops then all had a chance to see it. Subsequently, the House of Bishops has had a lot of turnover, so I have no way of knowing how many of them have seen it.
Katie, if it's technologically possible, is that all right for us to post it on our cathedral website or on the diocesan website?
Are you asking me if that?
Yes, I'm asking if that's okay to do, permission.
Oh, it's okay with me. We might want to check with Cynthia Black. I would not do it unilaterally. Cynthia and I joined at the hip on this project.
Lee Crawford, please go ahead.
First of all, I'd love it if you could put in the chat box the comment from Jim Naughton, because that's a useful and something to retain. And I'll say that I confess that my focus in the Anglican Communion has not been as focused on the bishops of Nigeria, Uganda, Rwanda, who are the ones that are the most profoundly anti-gay. But with my years of experience in the Anglican Church of Central America, it's been a slow journey forward, but they are.
Lee, you're breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
I'm having trouble hearing you, Lee. I don't know if others are.
Maybe I can always text you.
Okay.
I'm just saying that there's some progress. And in my 30 years of working with we are there. I do get horribly frustrated and angry.
Lee, it's hard. It's very, very muffled.
Well, I'll type. Okay, I will type.
I did put in the chat the piece from Jim Naughton. More questions, please. More comments, thoughts. I liked what you said, Katie, about people saying it's a slow process. You just have to wait. You just have to be patient. I remember that so profoundly from the civil union days and the fight for gay marriage. You get tired of saying, well, it's been 40 years. How much longer? Or it's been 100. Bob Stillman. Go ahead.
Stillman, Katie. I hope I'm not being naive, but I've heard that the Anglican bishops are physically threatened about the stance if they became advocates for the LGBT community. I mean, they could be killed. Is there any truth to that?
I would hesitate to say that's not true, given the experience of African gays who have indeed been killed. Bishop Christopher, who we featured, had his pension withheld from him, which caused a huge financial burden for him as he ministered and pastored gay men and women. And he came to the United States. He did not say that he fled to the United States, but he came to the United States and stayed for several months at one point. And a lot of organizations here, Integrity among them, helped raise money for he and his family. He has continued his advocacy work. He's not a young man. He has continued his advocacy work with immense courage and I mean, he's just an amazing saint of God, I think. And again, now in many places, the laws favor them. For instance, the laws in South Africa, but there's still violence against gay people. And so I suppose a gay advocate, any gay advocate is in danger. I'm not sure the bishops are in any more danger than anyone else.
Greta.
Yeah, thanks. I don't mean to hog the airtime, but since no one else had their hand raised after Bob, I thought I'd just jump back in here. So I don't know if this is a question or a comment or something that I'd appreciate your reflections on, Katie. There's a weird thing that happens to bishops when they go to Lambeth.
We call it the Lambeth lobotomy.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I was like, they drink the Kool-Aid, right? So bishops off, like our bishop, I'll just use Vermont as an example because Bishop Shannon and I talked about this. Head off with this great intention of, we're going to be fearsomely protective of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. We're not going to stand for any of these shenanigans, blah, blah, blah. And then they all come home and say, well, but we really need to keep having these conversations. And, I don't think we should rock the boat. And I'm with you on this, Katie, of I'm done getting dumped off this boat, so I'm not crazy, obviously. I don't know if you have any reflections on sort of why that is, or sort of how that happens.
Well, what bothers me is let's not rock the boat means they're using the bodies of LGBT people as ballast, as far as I can tell. And I'm not sure why it happens. I think it's a combination of things. I think it is, quite frankly, part of the Episcopal Church reverence of all things British. Have you ever seen Americans just turn to mush at an English accent? I think it is being in the Canterbury Cathedral, which is a gorgeous, awesome place. I mean, it is. It's beautiful. And to process in with all those hundreds of other bishops. And I mean, it's impressive. And to be part of that, oh yeah. And you're dealing with the Archbishop of Canterbury, a name that resonates through history in all ways, good and bad. I think Americans are impressed with anything that's older than 300 years. And there's a lot in England that's older than 300 years. I don't mean to say that they're all shallow or anything. I just think when you are locked together in some big rooms for 3 weeks, and you have all of this coming at you, and you have an archbishop, a spiritual leader telling you we all have to get along and the unity of the communion matters more than anything. It's hard to be strong and resist that, I think, and it's coming at you from all directions. I guess I'm amazed as many bishops resisted as do. Because you have to, they are only every 10 years, or until recently, they were only every 10 years. So the body of bishops that are there changes. So you may have a bishop that goes to 2 Lambeths, very rarely 3. So you have all these newbies at each Lambeth, and they're just blown away all over again. I don't know. I wish there was some way we could inoculate them, but I don't know. I don't know what that is, except to just keep. In this instance, what was good was the Twitterverse. The Twitterverse actually exerted pressure on some of our bishops that reminded them, hey, we're watching, we're listening. The people back home are watching and listening in a way that really wasn't the case before. So I think as people actually watched the out gay bishops, and I use that term, the out gay bishops from our church, being there without their spouses, and their spouses being excluded, it angered some people, it hurt them. And before, see, we wouldn't have known all of that necessarily. We would have had it, we would have read about it, but to see their faces, to see them in pictures, to see them in processions, it makes it more real. And I think it does exert pressure. It just lets the bishops know we're watching.
Thank you. These are great questions and wonderful responses. Martha, you are next.
Hi, Martha.
Oh, Martha,
I have to give true confessions here. I have been in the trenches with some of the people on this Zoom meeting, so.
It's lovely to see you. And also as a confession, Katie, I am with the Diocese of Massachusetts, so part of Province 1, but I get all the newsletters of the various dioceses, and I was thrilled to see this conversation. So great to be part of it. And I would love to hear from you, Katie, or others. So, just watching all the reports that came out of the Anglican Consultative Council, as we know, there are is it 3 or 4? I should know this, instruments of communion. There's the primates meeting, there's the Lambeth, there's an ACC, and I want to think there's a 4th one, which I can't remember what it is.
The Archbishop of Canterbury.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Katie. And certainly the ACC is the most democratic in terms of representation. I think 39 out of the 42 or 43 provinces were represented. So be very curious, especially the clergy representative is from Province 1, Ranjit Matthews, who just came back. It'd be interesting to hear from him. And I just wonder how, when you look at the full picture of Anglican Communion, Katie, if you have any thoughts or others about how that plays into it, because I think not to minimize what's happening here with the bishops and with the Archbishop, but there's a broader, much more, and I'm just kind of curious to hear what people think about that.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because, I read that Caesar used to have a slave in the corner of his chariot whose job was to whisper to him, remember, thou art mortal. Well, I think all our bishops need to have people whispering to them, remember, thou aren't the whole church. The Lambeth gathering is not a gathering of the church. It is a gathering of the bishops of the church. The Anglican Consultative Council is the only one that includes lay people, the only gathering, the only instrument of communion that includes lay people. So for me, I think it is the one that has the most authentic voice in the community. That and all of the women's organizations in the Anglican Communion. I would like to point out that not one women's organization in the Anglican Communion has ever passed a resolution saying any anti-LGBTQI. That's not where their energies are going. So yeah, there are these instruments of communion, which is a nomenclature that grew up out of the Virginia report that came in the aftermath of the 98 Lambeth and prior to the 2008 Lambeth. And I think it was a way to try to centralize power and the ACC has continually pushed back against that. The primates meeting has tried to accrue more power to it. And again, the ACC has pushed back against that. We do not have a curia in the Anglican Communion. We are not Rome. And the Archbishop of Canterbury is not a pope. And so I just think we have to keep saying those things, that these are the bishops of the church. This is not the church. We need to keep reminding ourselves about that.
Thank you for that. And again, not to minimize what we're talking about here, but I put a posting into the website, and I'll put a posting of the resolutions, because there was a lot, as you're saying, Katie, about women's issues, about environment, about a variety of issues that, is very much part of the process and what they're talking about. And yeah, so I just want to kind of name that. Thank you for that.
Martha, I noticed you asked earlier how much money is going to the communion. We actually looked at that when we were doing our resolution. I don't have the answer in front of me, but those numbers are available, I believe.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I have no idea. It's hard to find the budget on the Episcopal Church's website.
More questions? There must be, or comments? This is a deep dive for some of you into the weeds of the Anglican Communion, the Consultative Council, the Episcopal Church. It's an important discussion about the relationship of bishops to the people in the pews and to the rest of the clergy. So, Anne, do you want to say something? I saw you in your head there.
No,
We can hear you. No, okay. So as I said, this is a discussion, a meeting, a gathering to get this conversation going. We're going to meet at least 2 more times to think about what we want to bring to our diocesan convention in the fall. And Martha, I'm so glad you're here from Massachusetts, Province 1, because my guess is we will not be the only diocesan convention bringing a resolution to General Convention. What will happen at General Convention is we'll all go to a legislative committee and most likely be perfected, as they say, or conflated into one resolution that then goes to the House of Bishops, unless this starts in the House of Bishops and goes the other way. And then a resolution will come to the floor, which will not be the end, it will be that process of conflation and perfection that happens at convention, but something will come out of it. And I think it's important that our passion and our concern is heard, but also that of other dioceses at General Convention in Louisville.
And Stan, I just wanted, for just full disclosure before Betsy talks, is that I also chair the Churchwide Standing Commission on World Mission. So we are listening to these conversations and where people are at. So I just don't want to not say that.
Thank you, Martha. It's full disclosure. We should all disclose all of our larger connections. I'm on the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music and going even next. Betsy Emerson, please. Oh, you need to unmute.
may I ask anybody who doesn't have their microphone muted, that's not speaking, please mute it. Thank you.
I was listening to all those voices from Africa was very moving. And I'm thinking, what difference would it make a difference if a large quantity of LGBT people, say in the Diocese of Vermont to start with, spoke up, or in other dioceses, spoke up to our bishops? That's just a question. And I'd certainly be willing to be part of that.
Any of us LGBTQ plus people, I think it always makes a difference, Betsy. And I think the more that bishops hear from people in the parishes that they have jurisdiction over, the more powerful it is, the more important it is. I would say one thing that this brought up. One reason we chose to start with this Voices from Africa is very often, sometimes, not very often, the conversation is about people like me, a gay man who has tremendous privilege and rights, but gets upset because there are things happening that exclude me. And that's good. That's fine. That's true. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, there are people in the world who are Anglicans and not Anglicans whose lives are at stake over this, and that the bishops who continue to support those policies, and I know that they have a lot of political pressure from people, but it's those people whose lives are at stake that I'm most concerned about. And then secondarily, those of us who are queer and live in this country, who want to make the marriage rights are protected and things like that. It's important, but there's that deeper thing, which is why we wanted to start with Katie's excellent film.
And I want to say that we need to acknowledge that the changes that are happening in Africa are happening because of gay Africans and their courage and their advocacy and their marching, and they're having pride parades. I mean, that sound, you think a pride parade, wow, but a pride parade in Kampala, I mean, it is awe-inspiring, the courage and the faith that they have. And we need to acknowledge that all the time.
Before Joanna or Sarah, Katie, can you tell us what is happening? If I were to speak to any of the people in this film, and I know I'd get many responses, what would they say? What would they want us to do?
They would ask you to pray for them. They have an incredibly deep faith. That, I think, was awe-inspiring to Cynthia and me and Joe. I mean, it just shone from their bodies. And then the other thing is to keep the pressure up on our government, to keep the pressure up on our bishops, to have their back in as many ways as we can. They are on the ground doing the work, and they want to do that. They are not asking us to rescue them. And, but they are asking us to come up alongside them, undergird them in any way we can, particularly by keeping the pressure up on our government, on our churches, on our bishops, so that they can keep the pressure up on the Archbishop of Canterbury, so that when we speak of unity, their lives matter too.
Is there still an Out in Africa functioning group?
Yes, there are several. SMUG is one of them. There are many, many groups that were featured in this film that are still active. Sadly, integrity has sort of gone away in our church, but there are other organizations, the human rights organizations that follow this. And I don't have any specific funding sources for you. But I mean, researching that is certainly possible.
You notice in the chat, Bill Anderson has said information on the Anglican Communion is on the ENS website with provinces that do not contribute and budget information. Sarah or Joanna, whichever of you has your hand up, please go ahead.
In my experience, with people who are opposed to gays and lesbians and bisexual and trans people, it's rather futile to try to argue with them. They need the experience of meeting real people. And that if you can create occasions for that to happen, and especially if there are African-American gay clergy and lay who could be a part of an event where one of their bishops or and be part of a study group. It seems like to me that might be creating a positive experience for these folks without attempting anything along the lines of argumentative debate.
Our Bishop Shannon did say that she talked to some of the African bishops, and some of them had never met a gay person. So she took them by the hand and introduced them to some of our gay bishops. Thank you for that. And any more comments before we head into a time of prayer? There will be a second edition of this coming up. I'll find that if I can. See. I will let you know. It'll be, I'll make sure it's in the mountain and our website. What our second one is, my thought is, I know I've got it scheduled for post Easter at this point. Then we'll probably meet again in September to bring things together for the convention, which is the first weekend of November. Katie, do you have anything you'd like to leave us with before we pray our way out?
Well, I appreciate very much what you all are doing. Like I say, hold these people in your prayers. Their courage is amazing. And just remember them and the work they're doing hourly, to not just for themselves, but for everyone around them.
Katie, I also want to just thank you for your time with us, for putting this together, your articulateness. It's been a real honor and pleasure to have you among us, and
Thank you.
deep thanks to you, and to Cynthia Black and everybody else involved in the documentary. Thank you for that. It was very
Thank you.
Greta has agreed to leave us with a closing prayer. Please look in the mountain or on the cathedral website for the next day, or next discussion. Begin to dig more into what it is we want to say and do, what we want to say to the Anglican Communion, to Episcopal Church. Thank you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, God of all love, God of only love, we give you thanks for this gathering tonight, for the truths that have been told here, for the questions that have been raised, for the hearts that have been broken again and healed again and broken again. We ask that you watch over all of us as we leave this place tonight. Keep us safe as we manage our evenings and nights, so that we wake in the morning refreshed to do your service. Be with all of those in places where their very lives have been put in danger because of who they love and how they love. Be with the bishops all over the Anglican Communion as they continue to wrestle with their own consciences around inclusion and exclusion of your children. And be with us as we continue the hard work of moving forward in love together, and moving forward in justice together, and moving forward in the kingdom together. Watch over Katie as she continues her work, and thank you for bringing her to us. In your mercy we pray, through the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Go in peace to do the work God has given you to do.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan.
Bye. Good night.